They asked me to fund every dollar of the party, smiled to my face while I paid, then called the police to have me removed as a trespasser before the first toast was made. So I left without a word, and then I dismantled everything. I want to start with the exact moment, because I've replayed it enough times that I can describe it with the kind of precision that only comes from obsessive retrospect. I was standing outside the venue I had rented, in clothes I had bought specifically for the occasion, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched yet, when a security guard I had hired with my own money for this specific event walked toward me with the particular expression of a man who has been given an uncomfortable job by someone else. "Sir," he said, "I've been asked to escort you from the premises." I looked at him. He looked at me. Behind him, through the tall glass doors of the venue I had rented for $4,200, I could see the party that I had funded, from the invitations to the catering to the floral arrangements to the DJ to the open bar to the anniversary cake that had taken 3 weeks to design. I could see my family inside that room. My parents seated at the table of honor. My sister Diane standing near the bar in a dress I had not seen before. My brother-in-law, my aunts and cousins, everyone I had grown up with, gathered together to celebrate my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. A party that existed entirely because of my money. "Who asked you to do that?" I said. "I was told by the event organizer," he said, and I understood immediately what that meant. The event organizer was Diane, my older sister, the woman I had trusted to handle the logistics of the party I was paying for, because she had told me multiple times that organizing was her strength and I should let her take point while I handled the budget. I stood there for a moment in the cooling evening air and I thought about what to do. I thought about going inside. I thought about making a scene. I thought about walking up to my mother in front of everyone and asking her directly whether she knew that her son had just been removed from the event he paid for. I thought about all the things I could say and do that would create the immediate explosion that this moment arguably deserved. Then I handed the security guard my glass of sparkling water, thanked him for doing his job, and walked to my car. I drove home. I made myself dinner. I went to bed. And the next morning, I started making phone calls that would take apart every financial arrangement I had built with my family over the previous 6 years, one by one, with the same quiet efficiency with which I had been paying for things they had never fully appreciated. This is that story. My name is Marcus. I'm 32 years old. I have a job I'm good at. I work in logistics management for a regional supply chain company, which sounds boring and is, in fact, sometimes boring, but pays well and rewards exactly the kind of systematic, detail-oriented thinking that I apparently inherited from no one in my family of origin. I grew up the middle child of 3 in a household where the emotional economy was very clearly structured around my sister Diane, who is 5 years older than me and has occupied the position of family favorite with the unthinking confidence of someone who has never once questioned her own centrality to every room she enters. My younger brother, Joel, is 4 years younger than me and largely disengaged from family dynamics in the way that youngest children sometimes manage. Present for the good parts, mysteriously unavailable for the complicated ones. My parents, Robert and Patricia, are not bad people. I want to say that clearly and mean it. They love their children. They have done things for us that cost them real effort. My father worked a physically demanding job for 30 years. My mother kept a household running on a budget that required genuine skill and sacrifice. I don't have contempt for them, and I don't want to tell a story that makes them into villains, because the truth is more complicated and, in some ways, sadder than villainy. The truth is that they had a favorite, and they never tried very hard to hide it. Diane was first, and she was charming and social and performed the version of family devotion that plays well in public. The daughter who calls every Sunday, who remembers to compliment my mother's cooking, who never missed a birthday. She was good at the visible things. I was good at the invisible things. I started helping financially when I was 25 and had been in my job for 2 years and had more disposable income than my parents had seen at that age. My father's health was beginning to create expenses. I helped with a car repair, then a medical bill, then a plumbing situation that had been festering for months because they couldn't afford to address it. One thing and then another, and gradually, without any formal conversation about it, it became understood that Marcus was the one you called when something needed to be funded. Diane never contributed. I want to be precise about this because it matters. In 6 years of helping my family financially, I cannot identify a single instance where my sister put money toward a family need. Her explanation, delivered breezily whenever the subject came up, was that she and her husband were stretched thin. They owned a house. They went on 2 vacations a year. Her husband drove a new truck. But they were stretched thin, and everyone in the family accepted this framing without question, and I kept writing checks. I'm not saying I helped them expecting repayment. I helped them because they were my family and I had the means and they had the need, and that equation felt simple to me for a long time. What I wanted, what I think I was quietly waiting for, was to be seen. To be the person my family reached for, not just when there was a bill to pay, but when there was a table to sit at and a celebration to attend and a memory to make. That wanting is relevant to what happened next. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary fell in late October. 35 years is genuinely significant. It's one of those milestones that deserves acknowledgement, and I wanted to do it properly. I brought up the idea of a party at a family dinner in June, for months out, and the response was enthusiastic. My mother was visibly moved. My father said it would mean a lot to them. Diane said it was a wonderful idea. I laid out my thinking. I had a venue in mind. A nice event space about 20 minutes from my parents' house, capacity for around 60 people, private room with catering options, room for a small dance floor. I had priced it out already and had a number in my head that I was prepared to commit. I can cover the venue and the food, I said. If everyone pitches in on the smaller stuff, decorations, flowers, the cake, we can make this something really special. Diane said she would love to help organize everything. She had a good eye for events, she said, and she knew what Mom and Dad would love. Joel said he could probably help with something, in the vague way Joel agrees to things, which we all understood to mean he would be available on the day to accept compliments. We divided responsibilities loosely over the course of the next few weeks. I was handling all the major financial commitments. Diane was handling coordination, vendor communication, timeline, decor decisions, invitations. I gave her my budget parameters. She said she had everything under control. What I didn't do, and this is the mistake I've examined from every angle, the thing I would change if I could go back, was maintain oversight. I trusted her. I sent money when she asked for it without always asking what it was specifically for. When she said she needed an advance for the florist, I transferred it. When she said the venue had some add-on costs she hadn't anticipated, I covered them. When she said the invitation printing had cost more than expected, I didn't question it. By early October, I had spent approximately $8,400 on the party. This included the venue rental, catering deposit, bar tab reservation, florals, the cake, printed invitations, the DJ, and the security hire that Diane had suggested because the venue was in a neighborhood where she said she'd feel better having someone on the door. I said fine, covered it. My parents believed, based on how the family had presented it to them, that the party was a collaborative effort from all their children. I didn't correct this. It seemed more important that they feel loved than that they know the accounting. The day of the party was a Saturday. I arrived at the venue at 3 p.m., 2 hours before guests were due, to help with setup. Diane was already there with her husband and 2 of my aunts who had volunteered to help decorate. The space looked genuinely beautiful. The florist had done excellent work. The tables were set up well. The lighting was what I had imagined. Standing there looking at it, I felt a specific and quiet pride. This is a thing I built, I thought, for them. With money I earned and effort I organized and trust one extended. This is something real. The next 2 hours were surface level fine. We finished setup. Diane ran through the timeline with me and I noticed, or thought I noticed, something slightly clipped in how she was communicating with me. A little flat, a little over-efficient, but I wrote it off as pre-event stress. She was the coordinator. There was a lot to manage. Guests started arriving at 5. My parents arrived at 5:15 to a room full of people who cheered and clapped, and my mother started crying before she'd fully come through the door. My father put his arm around her and looked around the room and said something I couldn't hear from where I was standing, but his expression said everything. I stood near the back of the room and watched and felt, for about 20 minutes, exactly what I had hoped to feel. Then I went to the bar to get a drink, and when I turned around, Diane was standing next to the security guard I had hired, and they were both looking at me, and the security guard had the expression I described at the beginning. I'm going to tell you something that I've only recently been able to say clearly. In the 30 seconds between seeing their faces and hearing what the security guard said, I already knew. Not the details, not the specifics, but some part of me, the part that had been quietly keeping score for years even while I told myself I wasn't, already understood what was happening. I had paid for everything and now I was being asked to leave. I drove home with the particular mental silence that comes when something is too large to process in motion. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I made pasta, ate it at my kitchen table, and stared at a spot on my wall. The calls started that night. Not from my parents, they didn't call, which told me everything I needed to know about how the situation had been framed to them. From cousins, mostly. Confused texts. Where did you go? Are you okay? What happened? I didn't respond to any of them that night. What I did instead was open my laptop and spend 3 hours going through every financial arrangement I had with my family, documenting what I had paid over the previous 6 years, and making a list. The list was long. 11 medical bills, partially or fully covered. 3 car repairs. 1 roof repair my parents couldn't afford. Joel's rent covered for 4 months when he lost his job in 2021. Diane's, and I found this particular line item clarifying. Diane's legal fees from a contract dispute she'd had with a previous employer, which I had paid without a second thought because she'd come to me in distress and I was the one who had money and she was my sister. $47,000. Approximately. Over 6 years. Not counting the anniversary party. I'm not sharing that number to generate sympathy or to perform how much I'd given. I'm sharing it because it was the first time I had ever added it up. I had never added it up before because adding it up would have required me to acknowledge that I was keeping a ledger, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who kept a ledger of what they'd given their family. But Diane had kept one. She'd just kept a different one, a ledger of what she could take. I called my mother on Sunday afternoon. This was the conversation I had spent all of Saturday night preparing for. She answered on the second ring, and her voice had the slightly careful quality of someone who has been briefed. Marcus, she said. Yesterday, we didn't know you'd left until late. Diane said you had to go early for some reason. I had to go early. Diane had me removed from the party, Mom, I said. The security guard I hired asked me to leave. Diane sent him. Silence. She said you and she had some kind of misunderstanding, my mother said finally. About the planning. What misunderstanding? More silence. Then, I don't know all the details. I didn't want to get involved in. Mom, I said, and I kept my voice level because I had decided to keep my voice level. I paid for everything, every dollar of that party. The venue, the food, the flowers, the DJ, the cake, the invitations. Everything. I don't know what Diane told you, but there was no misunderstanding about the planning. She coordinated the event I funded and then had me escorted out before the first toast. My mother was quiet for a long time. I didn't know, she said, and I believe this was partially true. She didn't know the extent. She probably knew more than nothing. I'm not calling to make things difficult, I said. I'm calling because I love you and Dad, and I wanted you to know what actually happened. I'm also calling to let you know that I won't be making the same financial arrangements going forward that I've been making. She asked what I meant. I explained calmly that I would continue to have a relationship with my parents because I wanted one. But the informal financial support that had been flowing from me to the family, to everyone in the family, because by this point the arrangement had become diffuse enough that various people expected various things, was ending immediately. She started to say something, and then stopped. I need you to understand that this isn't anger, I said. This is a decision. There's a difference. I got off the phone feeling something I had never felt in 6 years of being the family's financial foundation, which was clean. Not happy, not triumphant, clean, like I had set something down. What happened next unfolded over the following weeks in ways I hadn't fully anticipated, though I should have. Joel called me 4 days after the party. He was confused and wanted to understand what had happened, and in the middle of the conversation it came out. Accidentally, I think, in the way Joel sometimes lets things out because he doesn't fully track what he's supposed to be withholding, that Diane had told the family before the party that she expected me to cause a scene. She said you'd been acting weird about the planning, Joel said. Like you were trying to make it about you. I made myself ask the next question carefully. When did she say this? I don't know. A few weeks before? She mentioned it a couple times. So she had preceded the narrative. Before the party even happened, she had been telling the family that I was difficult and territorial and likely to cause problems. The trespass call wasn't an impulsive decision made in the moment. It was a planned outcome. She had spent weeks laying the groundwork so that when she had me removed, everyone in the family had a pre-existing explanation that didn't require them to look too closely at what had actually been done. I thought about the legal fees I had paid on her behalf and felt something I can only describe as a very slow, very cold realization spreading outward from the center of my chest. She had done this before. Not this specific thing, but the architecture of it, the setup, the framing, the advanced narrative, the way she ensured that anyone who might advocate for me was already holding a version of events that made advocacy difficult. This was not a person acting out of sudden malice. This was a person who had been practicing. I thought back over years of family dynamics and began to see things I had been too close to see before. The times I had been subtly diminished in family conversations. The times my contributions had been reframed as obligations rather than choices. The times I had brought something to a family situation, a resource, a solution, an effort, and watched the credit quietly migrate elsewhere. I had been managed, carefully and consistently, for years. The arrangement had worked so well precisely because I didn't want to see it. I wanted to be generous. I wanted to be the person who showed up and provided and didn't make it about himself. That wanting had made me very easy to use. I'm going to tell you about a conversation I had with Diane, because I think it matters that I had it. 3 weeks after the party, she called me. She had not called me in the immediate aftermath. I think she had expected my silence to mean acceptance, the way my silences usually had. When I didn't come back around within a couple of weeks, when the money didn't quietly resume flowing, she called. The conversation lasted about an hour and 20 minutes. I am not going to give you every exchange. I'm going to give you the parts that clarified things. She told me approximately 12 minutes in that I had always had a way of making everything about my contributions, that I gave with one hand and reminded people of the giving with the other, that the reason she had not wanted me at the party was that she was afraid I would spend the evening fishing for thanks. I listened to this without interrupting. Then I asked her, "Is that why you spent weeks before the party telling the family I was going to cause a scene?" She paused. "I was just being honest about concerns I had. Concerns that didn't exist until you needed a reason to justify what you were planning." She said that I was being paranoid and that I was doing exactly what she'd predicted, making her feelings about me the center of the conversation. "Diane," I said, "I paid $8,400 for that party. I paid your legal fees 2 years ago. I've covered expenses for this family for 6 years. And what I would like to understand plainly and honestly is whether you have ever once told our parents the degree to which I was funding things they believed were collaborative family efforts." Silence. "Have you ever told Mom that the roof repair 4 years ago was fully paid by me?" Silence. "Have you ever corrected the impression that the party was something we did together?" "Marcus, I'm not asking to hurt you," I said. "I'm asking because I think you know the answer and I think the answer matters." She did not answer directly. She said that family finances were complicated and that she had always intended to contribute more when she was in a better position. She said that I had a different relationship with money than she did. She said that I had been more fortunate and that my fortune came with responsibilities that perhaps I didn't fully appreciate. And I understood then, with finality, that she was never going to give me what I was looking for. There was no version of this conversation in which she would say, "I took advantage of you and I'm sorry." That sentence would require her to hold a version of herself that she had built her entire family identity to avoid. I told her I wished her well and ended the call. It has now been 4 months since the party. Here is where things stand. I have not reinstated any of the informal financial support to the broader family. My parents have had to adjust some things, and I've heard through Joel that there have been some difficult months. I feel genuine sorrow about the ways this has affected them, because they are aging and they were used to a cushion that I provided, and the removal of that cushion has consequences that aren't entirely their fault. I've thought carefully about what I owe them as their son, distinct from what I owe anyone else in the family ecosystem, and I've quietly continued to help with things that are directly about their welfare and nobody else's. Medical bills, furnace repair. I'm not punishing my parents. I'm just no longer subsidizing Diane's belief that she can do whatever she wants without cost. Diane's marriage, I've heard indirectly, is going through a difficult period. I have no view on this either way. Joel finally got himself a stable job situation and doesn't need the kind of help he used to, which is genuinely good news and a development I take no credit for. I have been, in the months since the party, sleeping better than I have in years. This is the thing I keep coming back to because it surprised me. I expected to feel loss. I expected to feel the grief of a family narrative that had been exposed as something uglier than I wanted it to be. I did feel those things, but underneath them was this rest. The deep rest of a person who has stopped working very hard to not see something true. I had been, for years, the person who held things together and received no formal acknowledgement of that holding. I had told myself this was fine, that I wasn't doing it for acknowledgement, that the love itself was the reward. And there is truth in that. There is real truth in it. I did love my family. I did want to give. Those motivations were genuine. But genuine motivations do not make you immune to being used by someone who recognizes them and decides to take advantage. Generosity without discernment is not a virtue. It is a resource for the people who are looking for one. I know that now in a way I didn't before. I want to tell you about what happened at Christmas because it is where I think the story arrives at something close to an ending, though not the ending I would have written. I was invited to my parents' house for Christmas. A direct invitation from my mother, without Diane's involvement, made clear to me by the deliberate way my mother phrased it. Your father and I would like you to come. Just us and Joel. It'll be small this year. Diane and her family were celebrating separately, for reasons that were not fully explained to me and that I did not press. I went. I brought gifts. I sat at the kitchen table that I had eaten at my whole life and had the kind of dinner that families have. Not perfect, not fully honest, not free from the weight of everything that had happened, but real. My father told a long story about something that happened at work 30 years ago that somehow connected to the gravy, and my mother laughed at a part she'd clearly heard before, and Joel fell asleep on the couch before 9 o'clock. And I drove home through empty streets with the windows down despite the cold because I needed the air. My mother had said something to me after dinner, while we were washing dishes, that I've thought about most days since. I didn't handle things right, she said, not elaborating, not explaining, just that. I know, I said. I should have seen more, she said. I think I didn't want to. I handed her a dish to dry and I thought about how to respond to that for a moment. People don't usually want to see things that require them to change something, I said. That's not unique to you. She nodded and didn't say anything else about it, and we finished the dishes, and I think that is probably the most honest conversation we will ever have about what happened. I've made a kind of peace with that. Not the peace of resolution, the peace of acceptance. The difference matters. Here is what I know that I didn't know before the night I stood outside a party I paid for, and was handed my own glass of sparkling water back by a security guard I'd hired. I know that being generous does not make you visible. You can fund a room and still be invisible in it. Visibility comes from being known, actually known, not just relied upon, and being known requires a different kind of investment than money, one that some family systems are simply not structured to return. I know that a person can love you and still participate in arrangements that harm you, especially when the arrangements are comfortable for them and the cost is borne by you quietly enough that it doesn't register as a cost at all. I know that the silence I chose in the parking lot that evening, walking to my car rather than going back inside and creating the scene I had every justification to create, was the right choice, but not because it was noble. It was the right choice because it was mine, because it came from clarity rather than from the old reflex of managing the situation to protect everyone's comfort, including the comfort of people who were, in that moment, in a room I had rented, eating food I had paid for, while a security guard returned my unfinished drink. I know that ending an arrangement is not the same as ending love. Those can be separated. Took me a long time to believe that, but it is true. And I know this is the last thing, the one I keep returning to. I know that the version of me who showed up to the venue at 3 p.m. on a Saturday to help with setup, proud and hopeful, ready for a celebration he had built for people he loved, was not naive. He was not stupid. He was someone who had not yet received the information that was coming. Now I have the information. and I am, in ways I did not expect, doing just fine.